Hello, it's time for Combat Patrol Carnage. So we're back with issue 43 and it's time to slap some colour on our boys. So yeah, it's a nice in-depth paint guide as we have pretty much all the paints we need to paint these guys now. So we've got all our metals, our orky flesh, we got our cloths, our wrappings, our bones details to pick out. Then of course we've got our normal usual shades, and that's it for the models so far. As the next issue we'll be adding our basing technique to them, so we can't base them just yet, although I am getting ahead of myself and I've made a start on my ultramarines. So before we hit the table and shake our paints, don't forget to of course do all the usual. Like this video, subscribe to the channel and drop me a comment down below. Love hearing back from you guys. It goes massively out to helping out this channel, and it's a good way to help keep this community going. It's always nice to hear what people are doing in the hobby, and I do try to share as and when I can on my social medias, so you guys can see what I'm doing sort of behind the camera. Finally then, Combat Patrol Carnage is proudly sponsored by warbay.shop, your one-stop supply for all your hobby needs. They stock everything you need, from getting started with your first models, to expanding your force, to decorating your hobby area, and even your gaming bag as well. They also stock past and present partworks from Hachette, including Combat Patrol, so if you're wanting some extra models to add to your growing force, check them out. There's a link as usual in the video description, or you can head down to their physical store and check things out in person. Right, let's head to the table and we'll slap some paint on the boys! So here we are back with issue 43. I will apologise if there's any noise in the background. We've hit another heat wave here in the UK. So my fan is going to keep me somewhat less than roasty. It's not doing much, but it's better than the heat that is unbearable. But yeah, we're here to paint our Ork Nob, and as you can see, I've got the 9 boys painted, and he's looking a little, well, black for the moment. So yeah, we're going to paint him up in just a sec. So let's move these guys to the side. And we'll take a read through our paint guide and then we can dive right on in. Here we are with issue 43. We go past our build guide and here we are straight to our paint guide. So, how to paint boys. Follow this guide to paint your new unit of boys and their leader, a bullying Boss Nob. Gather your paints and your models, set up your paint station in the well-lit area, read the guide in full before you begin. And as you work your way through the guide, make sure you take regular breaks whenever you need to. So very handy and good advice there. So how do we paint our boys? Well, we're going to start with a undercoat of Abaddon Black. Personally, I would have probably chosen to do Ork Flesh. There's a lot more green on these models than there is black. Probably been easier to paint the black areas and just work from green upwards. But this is how the guide wants us to do it. Then we're going to set up all of our metallic areas with a couple of coats of lead belcher over the black undercoat. There's quite a lot of workings, especially on the Boss Nob. You've got different armour plates, you've got the workings, if you can call them that, on the Ooze Chopper. His boss pole. There's a few Nob boys with grenades, so don't forget to pick those out. Then we are using Ork Flesh to base all of the skin, so try to be neat, but we can tidy up as we go along. After that, we're going to be using Mechanica Standard Grey, and there's 2 ways you can do it. You can do it for the trousers or the tops, and we've got a little box here called Ragtag. So orcs are a rough and ready bunch, and the closest they get to a uniform is when they all try to outdo each other by wearing the best version of a certain colour. When you're painting your boys, you should aim to have them looking similar but not identical. Feel free to deviate from the guide and mix and match colours. For example, we might choose to paint some trousers grey and some black. You can also add patches of clashing red paint to the armour if you like. If we bring in my boys, as you can see, I've got one guy here who's got blue trousers. And there's the other guy that I've done there. And this guy here, he's even got a Baraknar burgundy top. So I've used a couple of extra colours from the collection just to, you know, help break up the kind of uniformity of the orcs. But yeah, mechanical standard grey is used to base coat tops and trousers. If you want to follow the guide, you can of course feel free to deviate like I've done. Captain Flesh next for all of our leathers. There's quite a lot on the boss. He's got a lot of straps. He's got his holster-free shooter. And yeah, pouches and stuff on this guy. Quite a few others with pouches and straps to pick out as well. Then we've got rack off flesh for any wrappings. So there's bandaging around the arms of some of the orcs. There's the wrappings on the huge chopper. Mephiston red is used for loincloths and the teeth markings on some of the armor plates even. Screaming pink is used just to pick out the tongues in the models. Finally, wraith bone for teeth and skulls, and then Corax white for the glyphs around the models. There's quite a few, some hard to reach areas, so you might not need to do those. But the prominent one is the boss shooter icon there as well. And don't forget to get the horns on the Boss Nob's helmet there as well. Then we're on to our shade stage. So we've got Coelia green shade, of course, on our orc skin. Then Nuln oil for our silver, red, brown and grey details, as well as our white. Don't forget to, of course, get the flesh tongue as well. Finally, Agrax Earthshade for all of our bone and Rakar flesh areas. And we're also using it to pick out certain areas on the guns and the grenades to add a little bit of variety. And then our final stage is to relayer the flesh with Ork flesh just to bring out that bright green again, and it does actually look kind of cool. You could skip this step by simply recess shading the orcs, but yeah, I think the relayering actually does work well for these guys. And there we go, there's our finished boys, and as you can see on the page, there's paint splatter from when I was painting mine. So, there we go. Right, let's bring my paint desk in and we'll get started on our Boss Nob. So, here we have our Boss Nob on the paint handle, 3 coats of Abaddon black down on him, and he's ready for his first colour. And it's our only metallic, which is Lead Belcher, so we'll give this a shake and get ourselves some prepared on the palette. And with our paint ready, onto our Boss Nob. So we've got his bionic eye here. Some of the downward facing teeth here on the jaw. Got a little belt buckle to pick out as well. Various plates around the armour, especially these spiky ones. We've got the mechanical workings of our huge chopper. And like I said, they're not really workings, they're more like slamming togetherings. And finally around the back we've got the boss pole here and the shooter as well. So there we go, all the silver done on our Ork Boss Nob, and we're ready to move on to our next colours. So we've got our matte colours ready here, and we're going to kick things off with the flesh for our Ork, which of course is Ork flesh. So once we've got some prepared on our palette, we're going to apply this to our Ork Nob. And Ork flesh is a fairly pale green, so you're going to want a couple of layers over that black base coat. So that's one thing that this and Death Guard green have in common. They're both very poor coverage. And back in Conquest magazine, when we was meant to base coat Death Guard models with, well, Death Guard green, it didn't go very well on the models because of the poor coverage. So we'll get all of the flesh on our Ork Nob here. He's got his big bare chest, his neck. You can call it a neck. Getting behind the mask for his face. And being careful around the bionic eye that we finished. his arms. That's pretty much it. For our next stage, we're going to want him off the base, which is why I left him as a sub-assembly for a moment, because we're going to go to Mechanica Standard Grey. This is going to be for the trousers, and we'll get the Rocky standing on while we're at it. So, onto our Boss Nob here. Turning him upside down, we can get his trousers. And we got his Boss Rock, or Tactical Rock. Keeping him off his base for the next stage, we're going to use Carnage and Flesh to pick out all the leather workings. So we're going to have a couple up underneath his leg, and the rest are mainly on his backpack. Most of the straps we're going to be touching on are fairly thin, so I've got my small layer brush here. So we've got this one here that goes around his leg. One going around his body, including the little pouch up underneath his jacket. And we got a couple of straps around the grenade, holding it onto his waist. And the one holding his trophy skull on as well. The last two small ones are the ones holding his boss pole on, and the one going across his back there. And then we can switch back to our medium base brush, and we'll pick out the holster with his shooter in. We're back on his base, and the Carnage and Flesh dried. We're ready to move to our next colour. So we're going to do all the leather wrappings, which is going to be done with Rackar Flesh. So a lot of these are small areas, so I've got my small layer brush, but we got the ones holding his wrist armour on here, and the ones around his ooze chopper. The Rackar Flesh dry, on to our next colour, and just a tiny bit of Mephisto red. This is going to be for his loincloth. So, good thing about this weather, paint dries quick. The bad thing about this weather, paint also dries quick. Or also, paint dries quick. Let's do that again. There we go. With Mephisto red down, we're on to our next colour. So, tiny bit of screen pink just to get his tongue behind his mask. Not even going to bother filling this down, I'm going to take it straight from the pot. Teeny bit on the end of our brush. I want to get it in down behind his jaw there, into his mouth. So there we go. A little bit of screen pink in the mouth. So, on to our final two colours, and we've got our first one being Wraithbone. This is going to be for the skulls, and of course, he's gob full of teeth. So onto our Boss Nob, we've got the horns on his helmet. We've got his little trophy skull down on his waist. As well as the head of the last boy to question his orders. You don't think so? I'm serious? Thwack. And then if we can, we got his teeth to get as well. We'll just get the top ones really, as they're the only visible ones that you're going to be able to see. There we go, his teeth done. I've even picked out the ones that are slightly visible behind the front tusks on his gold plate there. I'll touch that with some black in a minute. But first off, we've got Corax White for the glyphs. So he's got the fist on his belt buckle, and of course the gun on his backpack. So we'll do the boss fist on his belt buckle. We've got a tooth up on his shoulder pad armour here. As you can see, I've picked out the other one with red, which I forgot to do. And finally, we got the gun glyph here. Be careful around the finished silver. Don't worry about the black plate there. I'm going to touch that up again when I hit it with the black in just a sec. And there we go. I've done a tidy up of black all over the model, getting the areas that need to stay black nice and neat. So with all our base coats down, we're on to our final stages, and the first is of course our wash stage. So first up, Coelia Green Shade. So pretty simple, apply this all over our orc's skin. So we've got his hand, his exposed muscle under his arm, and of course his big burly matte but orkly chest. Be careful around the teeth there. And of course, don't forget his other arm. Being careful around banding on the used chopper. With our Coelia Green Shade dry, we're ready to go to our next shade, which is trusty old Nuln Oil. This is going to be for pretty much everything that isn't going to be bone or wrappings. So, got all of our metals, the tongue in his gob, as well as all of our white, red, brown and grey areas. And finally, we can go to our final shade, Angrax Earth Shade. So this is for all of the skulls, tusks and horns, and of course any leather wrappings. So we can start off with a big skull on the back there. He got the wrappings around his wrists, horns on his helmet, of course the wrappings on his huge chopper. While we're at it, we can also pick out some of the metal areas with our cracked surface to give it a bit of a brassy finish. So the head of the grenade is a good spot. Some of the other areas are workings on the huge chopper. So there we go, with everything dry, we're ready for our final stage, and that's to come in with our small layer brush and a fresh bit of orc flesh, and to relayer all of his skin. So with our paint ready, not too wet and not too dry, we're ready to apply this to the raised areas of flesh, defining his orky muscles. When it comes to your fingers, use the side of your brush just to pick those raised areas. And you can use the tip of your brush for the flats of the palms and the sides where possible. And there we go, our Ork Boyz are finished, and so is the awesome looking Boss Nob. And yeah, really coming along, looking really great. Skin looks good now that it's been relayered, but yeah, I still prefer darker green myself. Yeah, here we have our finished unit of 10 boys, and putting these guys out, what I do like about it is that yeah, there's some that are, you know, shooting left-handed, some shooting right-handed. They're not very uniform, which is pretty cool, which is what I used to like about Space Marines, as you could there used to be different pistol arms, so you could either have a left-handed pistol, right-handed pistol, etc. But they've changed it now, and it's all kind of pistols are always in the right hand, chainsaws are always in the left hand, and that kind of bores me. I liked having a bit of, you know, mixture in my squads, but yeah. Space Marines have definitely changed over the years, but these guys are still ramshackle as ever, and I love them for it. So up next then, we're going to name our boss and his unit, and then we're going to try them out as they crump some Tyranids for loot. So, all that's left for me to do is to say thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time on more Combat Patrol Carnage. Goodbye.